Tech Talk. G'day, Mathew Dickerson.
Good morning, Chris. How are you going this morning?
I'm good, thanks. And look, we're going to start on an electric vehicle topic. Now, we're at the stage where the electric vehicles can be charged as you drive along.
Well, it's interesting. There are some manufacturers out there with hybrid cars, and they make this wild claim that just charge your electric vehicle while you drive along. Don't worry about those silly all-electric vehicles. Of course, they're using petrol to get the car going and then using the slowing down motion, the electromagnetic brakes, to actually charge the battery. But that's not what I'm talking about here. This is a completely different concept. This is a concept that Indiana in the US is actually laying down a magnetic highway. They're actually putting coils underneath the highway, and as you drive along on this particular section of highway, the electromagnetic charging will actually occur in your car, so you'll be actually putting charge back in your batteries from the highway underneath. Now, at this stage, they're only doing it on a short quarter-mile section to test the concept, so you're not going to put much charge back in your car when you drive over that quarter-mile section. Sure, if you stopped along that section, you might, but you might have a few unhappy people behind you if you suddenly stop in the middle of the highway, just charging up, give me 10 minutes, it'll be all okay. But if this is successful, the plan is to have longer stretches of highway, motorways, freeways, that type of thing. So you can imagine you leave your house in the morning, jump in your car, and you say, gee, I'm only down to about half battery at the moment. I better go on the charging highway. You spend, half an hour on the way to work, and you get to work and you go, wow, that's fantastic. I've got a fully charged battery. So the concept is absolutely brilliant. There's a whole range of things from a technical aspect to work out, who pays for the electricity, is it a tollway, all sorts of things like that. But just testing the concept is the first part. The second part that's important for it, Chris, is that your car needs to be fitted with a wireless electromagnetic charger. So just the same as you have mobile phones now that can charge wirelessly, the phone's got to be compatible with it. So not any cars come out with this built into it at this stage, but there's lots of aftermarket accessories that have this, because some people put a wireless charger in their garage. So all they do is drive into their garage, park the car, and it automatically starts charging. And this is exactly the same concept here. As you drove along, it would actually charge it up. Indiana is the first place in the US to do it, but it's no surprise that it's not the first place in the world to do it. You've actually got a few places around the world that are already doing this same sort of concept, some in trial phases, some in actual normal production where you can just start using it as part of your normal daily commute. So over in South Korea, you've got this happening, over in Israel, and no surprises here. Norway, number one EV sales country percentage-wise in the world, have had this sort of concept going for a little while now, and even in Sweden you've got this same concept going.
Now let's move on to drones. Drones in wartime. I guess drones will be used in combat in the future, but this time we're talking about a blood delivery system for drones.
What a concept. We get lots of things delivered by drones at the moment, Chris. Pizzas and coffees and parcels and, now blood. Now, obviously, you can't have commandos out in the field carrying around blood in their backpacks because someone might get injured. Obviously, blood is not something that hangs around for a long time in a usable state, and you don't want commandos running around with refrigerators on their back to keep things cold. But in the field, you do have people injured. They are often patched up in the field, but the blood loss is a thing that might be the end of people rather than actually the initial injury itself. But if you can get blood into the battlefield quickly, this might be a solution to a problem. And commandos have been testing this over in Britain at the moment just to see how well this would work. They're not cutting and shooting up people and then letting them bleed out and then testing it. They're obviously doing it in a simulated manner. And the drones they're using are not your average little drones that you go and buy from some white goods retailer. There's some pretty serious drones. And again, as you can imagine, they need to go a reasonable distance because you need to have somewhere away from the battlefield that you could have access to blood, for example. And you need to be able to have the drones fly for a reasonable length of time. They're not going to be able to stop someone along the way and charge up. So these drones have got a range of 43 miles. Sorry about the Imperial there. It was all done in Britain, this testing. They can carry 140 pounds. They can fly for 36 minutes. So the other thing they've been testing with them is not just carrying blood, but carrying ammunition. And as you can imagine, out in the battlefield, you run out of ammunition. Well, you can't really keep advancing on the battlefield. You do what they do in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. They say, run away, run away. So you've got to turn around and retreat rather than continue to forge forward. So using the drones to get things, whether it be ammunition, whether it be blood, out to people in the battlefield, I think is incredibly important. I don't think they're talking about pizzas or coffee yet for people in the battlefield, but who knows what will be next.
It's Tech Talk with Mathew Dickerson. would you be comfortable if an Amazon freight delivery employee had a key to your building? Thousands of others.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one. In America is probably the big area for the battleground, if you like, for deliveries. And Amazon has been incentivizing building managers to use an Amazon key, not for all the individual apartments in an apartment building, but for the front door. And it's an electronic key, as you can imagine, because what they believe is that it's easier for Amazon employees to get through the front door and deliver parcels, maybe into the foyer, maybe give them to the doorman, but getting into the building. Now, some people that live in these buildings are pretty uncomfortable with the fact that you've got delivery drivers out there that can access essentially every apartment building. Now, it's not every apartment building yet, but that's the plan. So Amazon have been using gift cards to give to building managers to allow them to install what they call their key for business system. Now, again, you can understand it from Amazon's point of view. It makes it very easy. You don't have to buzz in. You don't have to wait till someone says, sure, you're really a delivery driver, I'll let you in down the ground floor. They just walk up to the door, scan themselves in, and away they go. Again, this is somewhere that you can imagine all the companies that are going to do major deliveries across the world, across the US, are trying to get to this stage where they make it easier, because then people in that building might be more likely to use your company for deliveries if they know that they can get into the ground floor and at least get the parcel delivered to the foyer or somewhere like that. So deliveries, remote deliveries, this is a really big area, really big, I suppose, competitive area, and this is Amazon's approach to it. But as you can imagine, Chris, some people aren't that comfortable with Amazon employees having access to all these different foyers of different buildings around the cities.
Now, last time I drove to the coast, a semi-trailer flicked a little rock up onto my windscreen, and I've got a crack the size of it's only a 5-cent piece size. It's not real big. What can you do for me, Matthew? Where are we at with technology there?
I can just take a lot of your money with that one, Chris. It's incredibly expensive at the moment to replace a piece of glass. And it's not just a piece of glass, but I actually had 2 windscreens I had to do last year, Chris, and one of them cost me $5,000 for a windscreen. Now, I almost had a heart attack at that, because what I used to remember is a windscreen was a piece of glass and it kept the wind out of your face, and that was about it. But no, there's so much more than that.
Did you go insurance?
Well, yeah, I did actually have insurance for that, luckily, but it was one of those things. I didn't think I'd need to have insurance for a piece of glass. I just thought my excess would be too high, but when it turned out that it was that expensive, it was ridiculous. So one of the things that's interesting in a windscreen now is that, yes, it's a piece of glass to keep wind out of our face. It's also a structural component of the car. If you roll your car, you need to make sure that you've got the correct windscreen and installed correctly, because you're relying on the strength of that windscreen. So that's all right. That might be a bit thicker bit of glass. But then all the new driver assistance technology that's built into a car, a lot of that relies on what's in your windscreen. For example, if you've got automatic dimming of high beam, there are sensors in the windscreen to pick up lights coming towards you. If you've got automatic driving built into your car, there are cameras either in your windscreen or behind your windscreen that need to see in a certain way to get through there. When it rains, your windscreen wipers start automatically. That relies on technology in your windscreen. Heads-up display, that's not just shining on a normal piece of glass. There's a special coating on that glass to allow a heads-up display to be seen by you as you drive along. So there's all this technology built into the windscreen, and then, as you can imagine, all those pieces of technology, when you replace a piece of glass, need to actually be hooked back up to the car. And then the real killer, this is the one that is the secret one, Chris, the recalibration. You need to actually recalibrate all those components, and not everywhere has the recalibration tool. So I had a friend of mine, this didn't happen with mine, but a friend of mine had a windscreen replaced recently. After the windscreen replacement, they hooked it all up, everything was right to go. The recalibration tools, this particular place didn't have them. They had to put the car on a truck, ship it 400 kilometres away to the nearest place that had the recalibration tools. It took them about 10 minutes to recalibrate, put it back on a truck, send it back to where it was initially, to then give back to the owner of the car. So there is a lot of technology built into a windscreen. We are demanding this as consumers. Insurance companies are demanding it safer for drivers, but of course it all comes at a cost, and the technology cost is quite dramatic in this particular case.
All right, Matthew, let's finish up with an EV news roundup. A whole lot of action occurring with different EV companies. There's
a whole lot of action, and it's something that I try not to talk about EVs too much, but there's so much action happening across the world. Rivian, we've talked about Rivian a little bit. They've got this unbelievable pickup truck or ute that's really going to take over America. They've just raised another $2.5 billion of funding. That means a total of $10 billion has been raised by Rivian so far. And the number of cars they've sold at this stage, Chris, is 0. So that's $10 billion. They've been going for about a decade. They're talking about a second factory being built to produce their batteries, and they still have not had one car in the hands of a consumer yet. So there's obviously a lot of confidence out there in what people believe. Now, Rivian's backed by some big companies like Amazon, like Ford, so people have got a bit of confidence in investing in it, but that seems like a lot of money to raise without actually having produced a single car. Mind you, Amazon does have an order for a large number of delivery vehicles, so you'd be pretty confident there'll be a few sales out there once they finally get going. So that'll be one to keep an eye out for in terms of Rivian. I think we'll see a lot of action in that pickup truck, that ute space, and again, I think in America that'll take off, but people in Australia are calling out for that as well. So then if you move on to Lucid Motors, they're talking about a merger as well. They've got about $4.5 billion they're raising in this latest fundraising. Again, they haven't produced a single car yet that you can go and buy, but they're obviously out there raising money to make sure they've got all the investment ready to go. Mercedes-Benz have revealed some dramatic new electric vehicle plans. They're talking about what they'll be producing in terms of electric vehicles. They'll even be bringing some into Australia, and they're talking about the fact that by 2025 the company will stop developing any new petrol or diesel powered platforms. They'll still be selling those cars at that stage, but no new development after 2025, and they're even talking about 2030 as being the time frame that they may actually stop selling petrol and diesel vehicles altogether. So a lot of action happening there, and Tesla is the latest one, obviously the electric vehicle darling of the world. They've just had their latest quarter of sales, and this is a company that was struggling at one stage to get in the order of maybe 50,000 sales a year. They're now up to 206,000 sale of vehicles they sold in the second quarter of this year. So if you extrapolate that out, that's getting up around 800,000 vehicles for a year. Now, still not a huge number compared to the General Motors and the Fords of the world, but not going too bad for a company that just has a very limited range of electric vehicles only.
All right, Matthew, we will talk again next week. Of course, people can catch Tech Talk on podcast and YouTube. Absolutely right.
You can see and listen to this content and more of this type of content. But look, it's going well, Chris. Lots of people are interested in this type of technology content, and I love the listeners, the feedback we get from 2WEB listeners.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Chris.